With the WINN FM News, I am Kevin Brown.
And I am Yulana Weeks.
Our top stories.
Kittishan father James Clark shares with UNICEF his decision to break the negative cycle of fatherhood.
OECS Assembly convenes, calls for deeper integration amidst global shifts. U.S. travel restrictions and Caribbean concerns, a developing story.
Liat partners with St. Kitts Music Festival and White Sands for 2025 showcases.
Guyana president promises to make sugar great again. St. Lucia tourism minister dismisses rumors of a U.S. travel ban on St. Lucia. Internationally, Iran rejects Trump's call for surrender, vows response if U.S. attacks. Now, the details.
The United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund, UNICEF, featured a Kittishan father, James Clark, on its social media platforms on Father's Day, June 15. Clark, a father to a toddler named Jarian, explained the factors that encourage and reminds him to always be a supportive and ever-present dad. His aim is to give his son a chance to experience a father's love and protection, an experience that he was not fortunate to have during his childhood.
What makes me happy as a parent is the ability to actually be there. Because growing up, all I really know was my mother, and my mother had her own issues and she had her own flaws. So do I. And I never seen my mother abandon me, but my father abandoned me. He had his reasons, I don't understand. I have mine, and I understand that my son needs me. And his future will be pretty dim.
The young father chose to break that negative cycle of fatherhood in raising his son, sharing the emotional impact that could scar a child without the presence of a father.
I mean, with his mother alone, if his mother alone does the task, he will make it, but not to the extent that he's sure that he's supposed to sometimes, because there will be a little emotional bruise and scars because the father isn't there to help the mother and the father isn't there to guide the child. So that's one of the things that makes me be a parent, being able to be there. Whether he lashes out at me, he cries at me, or he's happy with me. It means a lot coming from the life that was set before me and the life that I have to change from. So me seeing him not go through half the things I went through, me seeing him exceed way better than me, means a lot for me, my happiness and his future.
UNICEF considers fathers as one of the best child development resources that exist, a role that should be fully recognized and utilized so that children can be given the best start in life. Father's Day falls within the month of June, which is also recognized as Parenting Month. Global Day of Parents is celebrated on June 1 annually, with the guided theme for 2025 being Raising Parents.
The 7th sitting of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States OECS Assembly convened on Tuesday, June 17th in St. Vincent and the Grenadines under the poignant theme, Strengthening Regional Unity in a Shifting Global Order. The gathering brought together OECS heads of government, the Director General, representatives from the parliaments of full member states and the legislatures of associated member states, including members of the opposition. The Assembly's agenda featured the reading of 5 crucial regional bills: the Animal Health Bill, the Plant Health Bill, the Food Safety Bill, the Standards Bill, and the Customs Control and Management Bill. These legislative proposals aim to further the OECS Economic Union established by the revised Treaty of Bastia in 2010, which replaced the original 1981 treaty. The revised treaty aims to create a unified financial and economic space, facilitating the free movement of goods, people, and capital, while also harmonizing monetary and governmental policies. Prime Minister the Honourable Dr. Terence Drew of St. Kitts and Nevis leading his national delegation, which included Alexis Jeffers representing the opposition, emphasized the collective thrust of these bills.
But when looking at these 5 bills, and I look at them at a suite of bills, because I think they have the same thrust. And that thrust really is to promote and increase trade among member states, but also to promote and to help to solidify even further our unity as a region. And in that spirit, I would speak to the suite of bills that are before us today.
Dr. Drew further referenced the foundation of the OECS.
The revised Treaty of Bastia, as you know, was in 1981. My home country, I don't think I can remember it. I may have been too small to remember even that. But I would say when you look at it, the essence of it is really to bring us closer together as a region.
He asserted that the benefits derived from regional unity would be unattainable by individual states. Highlighting the tangible benefits of this united approach, Dr. Drew pointed to the Eastern Caribbean currency.
Our currency, of course, is in our small region. We are just about maybe 650,000 people. I think we are less than 1 million. But none would doubt that our currency has punched above its weight. Tell me which individual country in here could have had a currency if they were to have one for themselves. Again, speaking to the power of our unity and speaking to the power of the OECS.
8 OECS members share the Eastern Caribbean dollar, a currency governed by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Dr. Drew also drew a compelling parallel regarding healthcare costs.
I will also speak to the fact that within the region, we may not know, that while I see recently Joe Biden had to pass a bill to make insulin accessible to the people of the United States, I could not believe. I studied in the United States as well, but I did not recognize that there were people who could not afford insulin. And he had to pass a bill to make sure insulin, a very basic medication, was available to the people of the United States. And this is the most powerful country, richest country on earth that could not guarantee insulin to all of its members. What does that have to do with us? Because of the OECS structure, where we buy medication in bulk, and many of us don't even recognize that, the cost of insulin is very cheap in our region. And so we take it for granted. Almost every country in this union have insulin free of cost, or the cost is so minimal that nobody ever speaks about it. But it's not because we are special, but it's because the OECS is delivering a platform and a mechanism to ensure that our people can have access to a medication as basic as insulin, when powerful countries as the United States, where insulin may have developed, they could not even deliver it to all of their people.
Pooled procurement of health commodities is indeed a promoted solution to reduce prices and increase availability. Further advocating for increased regional collaboration, Dr. Drew turned his attention to the high cost of energy within the OECS.
What if we were to buy in bulk our energy needs as a region? I am almost certain that that cost will go from 30 to 40 US cents and can be driven down to 10 cents because we'll have more bargaining power in addition to a broader market.
He underscored this as a low-hanging fruit and not a pie in the sky, given the OECS's proven track record of successful joint ventures. A significant portion of Dr. Drew's address was dedicated to the importance of political unity, citing the geothermal project in St. Kitts and Nevis as a prime example.
In St. Kitts and Nevis, I have taken a different approach in terms of my relationship with the opposition. On the second day that I was elected as Prime Minister, I called the leader of the opposition. And I said to him, we're going to disagree on a lot of things, because that's what oppositions do. They're supposed to complain about a lot of things. That has its role. But I said that there are some things for national development on which we will not disagree. As a matter of fact, we will unite and put a united front, because the benefits that we are to derive from these things will benefit all of us. And individually, no government, no party will be able to achieve it.
The Nevis geothermal project, backed by significant funding from the Caribbean Development Bank and other international partners, is set to drastically reduce electricity costs and carbon emissions, demonstrating bipartisan cooperation.
Nevis has a rich deposit of the geothermal, one of the largest in the Caribbean and most accessible.
Dr. Drew stated, adding that the federal system historically complicated its development due to political strife.
But because of the federal system of St. Kitts and Nevis, no one government would ever have the opportunity to really leverage that unless there is cooperation between government and opposition generally in the country.
He highlighted the positive outcome of their unified approach.
We have reached the point now where we are about to open the bids to start the drilling for the geothermal, something that could not have been done for decades because of political strife.
This collaborative spirit, as emphasized by Dr. Drew and Premier Mark Brantley, has been crucial to the project's advancement. Dr. Drew concluded his remarks by urging a similar commitment to unity at the regional level.
So my message also here to us is that as the oppositions are here, there are things we can always disagree. We can disagree on 95+%. But there has to be at least one or two major things that we must agree on. And that can help, of course, to advance not only our individual countries, but also the region.
His parting message was a call for
greater unification, which will result in benefits for all of us.
Using St. Kitts and Nevis's recent success as a tangible example of what can be achieved through common ground. In a differing perspective, St. Lucia's opposition leader Alan Chastanet, addressing the same assembly, expressed concerns about the OECS assembly becoming, quote, too ceremonial, and suggested that the OECS could consider breaking away from CARICOM if the relationship is not yielding desired results. He questioned the practicality of a standard policy on tariffs given the differing stages of development among member states. Despite these reservations, the prevailing sentiment at the Assembly, as championed by Prime Minister Drew, remains a focus on harnessing regional unity for collective advancement, drawing lessons from successful internal collaborations and past OECS achievements. Reports of a leaked United States Department memo have sent ripples of concern across the Eastern Caribbean, notably impacting St. Kitts and Nevis and its citizens amid fears of potential travel restrictions to the U.S. The internal diplomatic memo, reportedly signed by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, outlined a dozen concerns and called for corrective action from the targeted countries. The memo explicitly states that the department has identified 36 countries of concern that might be recommended for full or partial suspension of entry if they do not meet established benchmarks and requirements within 60 days. This proposed expansion could significantly broaden the scope of U.S. travel restrictions affecting 36 additional countries, including 4 Caribbean nations, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, and St. Lucia. Issues reportedly flagged by the U.S. include the management of citizenship by investment (CBI) programs, the timely provision of documentation to U.S. authorities, repatriation of deportees, and concerns over visa overstays. The U.S. reportedly views these CBI programs as potential loopholes for individuals from already banned countries to gain entry using secondary passports. In response to these circulating reports, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis issued a statement on June 17, 2025, acknowledging the concerns these reports may naturally generate. However, the government was clear in asserting that no official correspondence or communication has been received from the United States government, whether through the embassy, consular representatives, or any other channel, indicating the existence of impending issuance of any such travel ban or restriction that targets St. Kitts and Nevis or its citizens. While stressing the lack of formal notification, the government stated that the mere circulation of such a report is concerning enough. Consequently, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis confirmed that it is actively engaging its diplomatic and international partners to determine the source, credibility, and veracity of the claims now in circulation. The statement underscored that the protection of our citizens at home and abroad is a top priority and urged citizens to rely on official government channels for accurate and timely information. During a press briefing on June 17, 2025, U.S. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce was asked about the potential travel ban affecting 36 countries, many of them in Africa. While she did not specifically address the Caribbean, Bruce emphasized that the U.S. visa adjudication process is guided by national security, not geography. She explained that the process must ensure
U.S.-bound foreign travelers do not pose a threat to the national security and public safety of the United States.
Bruce described this as
that is, I think, a very low bar and is a bar that every nation should be able to adopt.
She elaborated on the U.S. assessment criteria, which include
security capabilities, information sharing, and identity management practices, exploitation of the U.S. visa system, such as overstay rates, and failure to facilitate the repatriation of their removable nationals.
She reiterated that
So, noting where a country, perhaps as you did, is located, the geo position, the actual location of a country, is not a factor, or what continent that country is on.
Regarding the purported deadline for countries to submit action plans, Bruce clarified that affected countries
will have a considerable amount of time to rectify whatever the situation is.
The goal, according to Bruce, is not punishment but collaboration.
If they don't get to that point where we can trust them, and they've got to change the system, update it, do whatever they need to do to convince us that we can trust the process and the information they have. So that is the goal of this. The Secretary will have the discretion to determine whether or not someone is on that list, as we then also continuously vet the nature of what's happening within these conversations. And the goal is so that we can all move forward. so that people can come to the country. And that's our goal.
This developing situation highlights the ongoing diplomatic tightrope walk as Caribbean nations, heavily reliant on tourism and their CBI programs for economic development, navigate U.S. national security concerns. The transparency and cooperation between these nations and the U.S. will undoubtedly shape the future mobility of their citizens.
On Friday, June 13, 2025, representatives of LIAT 2020 Limited visited Destination St. Kitts for a pre-event leading up to the highly anticipated St. Kitts Music Festival and White Sands Affair. LIAT 2020 officials were at White Sands Friday Parisian soiree at the Carambola Beach Club, engaging potential passengers and marketing unbeatable ticket prices. It also served as an opportunity to connect with the Kittitian public and strengthen the visibility of the LIAT 2020 brand. With the message, "Your official ride to the rhythms," the airline encouraged the passengers to fly with them for tickets as low as US $149 inclusive of tax. Additionally, the airline launched a ticket giveaway campaign with a deadline set at June 18, 2025. Interested persons were encouraged to like the post with the ticket giveaway campaign on Facebook and Instagram, share it to their stories, tag 3 friends in the comments, and follow at FlyLiat2020 and at Carambola White Sands. However, persons who already purchased their ticket would be automatically entered into a draw to win a free LIAT 2020 flight to any destination in the airline's regional network. LIAT 2020 destination route includes Antigua, Barbados, Dominica, Dominican Republic, Grenada, Guyana, Jamaica, St. Kitts, St. Lucia, St. Martha, St. Vincent, Tortola, and Trinidad.
In regional news, Guyana president promises to make sugar great again. News source Guyana reports.
President Irfan Ali has defended his government's continued investments in the sugar industry as not just support for the industry, but also support for the thousands of families connected to the industry. Delivering the keynote address at the 177th commemoration of the Enmore martyrs in Enmore, President Ali vowed that his government will continue to make investments in sugar. He admitted that it is a costly exercise, but one that he believes is worth the investments.
And make no mistake, we will make sugar great again. Guy Suku has begun to fight his way back. As of recent, factory downtime is down by 22%. Cane yields have risen by 11%. Investments are being made in predictive maintenance, automation, and drone-assisted field monitoring. Mechanization is being rolled out, not to replace people, but to support operations in the face of labor shortages.
The president also said although times have changed and the world is moving, the role of the sugar industry to sustain lives, livelihoods, and communities remain vital in Guyana today.
Therefore, let no one dare tell you that sugar is a relic, that it is dead, that it is a burden, because they would not only be wrong, they would be dangerously mistaken. Sugar is still vital, especially to the rural economy. It directly and indirectly supports about 1/5 of our population.
The president said not only does the sugar industry provide jobs, but it ensures the circulation of money in rural communities, sustains families, and provide other social benefits. The president of the Guyana Agricultural and General Workers Union, C. Paul Marine, said hope is rising in the sugar industry.
But today, there is hope once more in the sugar belt. Since 2020, the People's Progressive Party government, under the astute leadership of President Dr. Irfan Ali, has worked with resolve to revive and revitalize the sugar industry, to bring relief to affected communities, and to restore dignity to the working class.
Mr. Narayan, whose union has been complaining about Gaisuco's failure to meet its quarterly production targets, also hailed the government's intervention in the industry, stating that for the first time in its history, Gaisuco and GAWU were able to ink a 3-year agreement for wages and other improvements for sugar workers.
Comrades, in the sugar industry, we have seen real investments, the reopening of estates, training and reskilling initiatives, and a renewed sense of purpose. We have seen jobs being created, lives being rebuilt, and faith being restored.
Sugar production continues to be on the decline, with the lowest production rate recorded over the past year.
St. Lucia Tourism Minister dismisses rumors of a U.S. travel ban on St. Lucia. DBS St. Lucia has that story.
Tourism Minister Dr. Ernest Hilaire says that the government is monitoring the toughened immigration policy landscape in the United States as St. Lucia has entered the carnival season. He notes that a large part of the attendance at Carnival is St. Lucians living in the diaspora, and that any uncertainty or unease amongst them can have an effect on Lucian Carnival 2025. Nevertheless, Dr. Hilaire says that talk of St. Lucia being on a leaked memo of a list of countries for a possible travel ban in the U.S. has no validity.
We have had no official correspondence from the United States, and when we've spoken to them, they too have told us that there is no such official correspondence or matter to bring to our attention. So it is business as usual for us. But you can imagine the disquiet and the discomfort it is creating for St. Lucians in the United States, and not just St. Lucians, all Caribbean people, as well as, all immigrants living in the United States right now. It's not an easy time. So we are closely monitoring the effect that can have.
He also addressed concerns that the U.S. is worried about the use of Cuban medical personnel in St. Lucia's healthcare system and the Island Citizenship by Investment Program, CIP.
Nobody really knows until you get correspondence that specifically tells you why, if it happens. But don't forget, it's not only Caribbean countries. It's happening in Asia, in the Far East. So one doesn't know, and until you get correspondence, it will just be sheer speculation. We know they have raised the issue of the use of Cuban medical personnel. We know we've been engaged with the United States on the CIP. They gave us what they call the 6 principles that we had to follow, and that if we follow those 6 principles, it would be an acceptable arrangement for them. We have implemented all of the 6 principles agreed to with the United States.
Dr. Hilaire says that the U.S. has not raised any other issue with St. Lucia. However, he says that he is sure the matter was discussed at the 77th meeting of the OECS Authority in St. Vincent and the Grenadines on Tuesday. For the DBS News World, Miriam Montoute reporting.
We now bring you these international reports.
Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, rejected US President Donald Trump's demand for unconditional surrender on Wednesday. It came as thousands fled intensified Israeli airstrikes in the Iranian capital, Tehran, prompting Turkey to tighten security at the border it shares with Iran. In a recorded television speech, Khamenei said Americans, quote, should know that any US military intervention will undoubtedly be accompanied by irreparable damage.
Iran's got a lot of trouble.
Trump has veered from proposing a swift diplomatic end to the war to suggesting the United States might join it. In social media posts on Tuesday, he mused about killing Khamenei and demanded Iran's unconditional surrender. A source familiar with internal discussions said Trump and his team were considering joining Israel in strikes against Iranian nuclear sites, among other options. Israel's military told Iranians to leave parts of the capital for their safety while it struck targets. It said 50 Israeli jets had struck around 20 targets in Tehran overnight, including sites producing raw materials, components, and manufacturing systems for missiles. The prospect that Trump could bring the United States into the war has raised the stakes since he abandoned a G7 summit and met his security officials in Washington on Tuesday. Iran's ambassador to the United Nations in Geneva, Ali Bahraini, told a news conference he already saw the US as complicit in what Israel is doing.
If we come to the conclusion that the United States is directly involved in attacks against Iran, we will start responding to the United States.
Iran has been exploring options for leverage, including veiled threats to restrict access to the Gulf through the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most important shipping artery for oil. Tehran has in the past threatened to close the strait, but has never followed through. While inside Iran, the biggest attacks since the war with Iraq in the 1980s have wiped out an echelon of senior leadership. Authorities have allowed fewer images of destruction to circulate than in the early days of the bombing, and a ban on filming by the public has been imposed. In Israel, sirens rang out warning people of Iranian retaliatory missile strikes. At Ramat Gan city train station east of Tel Aviv, people were lying on city-supplied mattresses lined along the floor. Among them, Tamar Vaiz, prepared for her second night in the makeshift shelter, alongside her 2 children.
I feel scared and overwhelmed, especially because I live in the densely populated area that Iran is seeming to target, and our city has very, very old buildings without shelters and without safe spaces.
Let's, as promised, turn to Gaza because the health ministry says at least 40 people have been killed by Israeli fire in the Palestinian territory, including 14 who were seeking aid. The Israeli military said there were repeated warnings the area is an active combat zone and a group of suspicious individuals were identified as posing a threat to IDF forces. Well, witness reports and medical officials inside Gaza said that more than 50 people were killed yesterday when Israeli forces opened fire using tanks and drones in what was potentially the deadliest of the shootings that have taken place near aid distribution sites. James Elder from UNICEF, he posted video from Gaza in the last 36 hours.
I just spoke with a woman who spent 9 years trying to conceive, and now her only child, her son and her husband have just been killed. The look of despair in her eyes. Immediately after, I'm talking to a mum who is watching her little boy die in front of her because he's denied medical evacuation. Or I think of little Rehab I met who said, and I'll read it, they killed my mother. I used to be beautiful. Now I cannot wash. What do you want me to say? What is there to say in the face of such pain? Such pain here in Gaza and such impunity everywhere else. Sorry. Maybe that's it. Sorry.
Well, that was James Elder in Gaza. He's now out of Gaza. He joined me just a little earlier on the programme and we talked about that heartbreaking video and what he's been seeing over the last few days.
When you and I are speaking now, there is without doubt Gaza is in its worst state. And that's because of everything that we know, because there's an attempt to circumvent an aid system and militarise it and mass casualty events every day because 500,000 people are starving and they're taken to official combat sites, and then the scenes are horrendous. I would see them in the evenings from where I stayed. But now at the same time, we have a water crisis, which is famine-like of water, if you will. Ever since the horrors of October 7, Matthew, electricity was turned off to the Gaza Strip, so water supply requires fuel from the wells, from the desalination plant to the trucks. No fuel has been allowed in Gaza for 100 days. That continues. We start seeing children die of thirst. Already people are drinking brackish water. We have not seen this before. So yeah, the people of Gaza have been pushed to another brink.
When you say things are getting worse, we see the pictures. All of us are constantly updated by statistics, just raw numbers. It's really difficult to actually be able to gauge what people are going through. Just give us more of a glimpse of the sorts of things you have seen.
Yeah, so, for example, when I first got there, Matthew, it was very clear to understand, and because there was so much disinformation around what was happening at these militarised sites, and we were hearing horrendous stories, so I immediately went to Nasser Hospital. Nasser Hospital is under siege. Everywhere around it is an evacuation site. And I immediately met a little boy, a 13-year-old little boy who sticks with me. He had been given money by his father to go and buy bread. The family's starving. Starving is a technical term. Famine is too late. You've got mass death. Starving, the body's starting to collapse. That's happening across Gaza. As he saw it, he saw people heading to one of these distribution points, and he thought, this is my moment to help my family. He went there, same thing, quadcopters shooting. He got shrapnel from a tank shell. When I met him, he was in immense pain because there's no painkillers. These days, Matthew, you don't just see the wounds of war in children, you hear them, you hear the screams of girls and boys. This little boy, though, as I did a video because his family wanted his story told because they wanted medical evacuation, he sat up, Matthew, he sat up through the pain. It was immense. Anyway, Abdul Rahman, 13-year-old boy, and I saw him a couple more times. His mother doing everything she possibly could, his situation declining, countries around the world not willing to take children. And the day I left, he died. Another child who's, killed trying to get food for their families. Those stories, north to south, east to west.
Now, in Paris and in London and in other capitals, only a fortnight or so ago, there was growing anger from governments at food being used as a weapon, the blocking of UN aid deliveries. How concerned are you that we now have another conflict in the Middle East, Israel, Iran, that appears to be again diverting attention and focus?
Well, hugely, because this is now the worst moment that those people in Gaza have had. And it would seem straightforward that if the world understood that the denial of more than 100 days of fuel being allowed into the Gaza Strip means that children are going to start dying of thirst, I don't even know of a scenario. There is not a historical precedent whereby a population is denied all the means of survival whilst they are bombed on a daily basis and not allowed to leave the combat site. So, yeah, it's a treacherous time. And Gazans feel that, Matthew. It's very sad. I speak to a lot of people when I'm in Gaza, and they say to me in perfect English that we are well aware that international humanitarian law does not apply to us. They, too, feel the great distraction, that there is a great distraction now, geopolitical that it is, but that the world has looked away at a time where, as a father said to me, we've learned to live. As much as we don't, we've learned to live. Having lost loved ones, having seen our home of 30 years that we took 30 years to build destroyed, we've even learnt to live without food for a week. We can't live without water.
Yes.
But the world's attention is diverted.
Nippon Steel closed its nearly $15 billion acquisition of U.S. Steel on Wednesday, the company said, and a big winner could be the Trump administration. Under the deal's terms, Nippon bought 100% of U.S. Steel shares as it first laid out in its offer for the struggling steelmaker in late 2023. But the terms also include a national security agreement inked with the Trump administration, which gives President Donald Trump the authority to name a board member as well as a non-economic golden share. The golden share gives the U.S. government veto authority over a raft of corporate decisions, from cutting production output to moving U.S. Steel's headquarters out of Pittsburgh.
A strong steel industry is not just a matter of dignity or prosperity and pride. It's above all a matter of national security.
The measures represent an unusual level of control conceded by the companies to the U.S. government in order to save what had been seen as a controversial merger. The deal had been opposed last year by both then-President Joe Biden and Trump, as the two tried to woo voters in the key swing state of Pennsylvania, and after the United Steelworkers Union also opposed the merger. Biden blocked the deal on national security grounds, prompting lawsuits by the companies. But the steel companies saw a new opportunity in the Trump administration, which opened a fresh 45-day national security review into the proposed merger in April. A month later, Trump headlined a rally giving his vague blessing to a, quote, investment by Nippon Steel, which he described as a great partner.
They've made a very big commitment, and it's a very big investment.
The acquisition will give U.S. Steel an $11 billion investment through 2028, including money for a new U.S. mill. It will also allow Nippon Steel, the world's fourth largest steel company, to capitalize on a host of American infrastructure projects while its foreign competitors face steel tariffs of 50%.
You were listening to the WINN FM 98.9 newscast. Our top stories were:
Kittishan father James Clark shares with UNICEF his decision to break the negative cycle of fatherhood.
OECS Assembly convenes, calls for deeper integration amidst global shifts. U.S. travel restrictions and Caribbean concerns, a developing story.
Liat partners with St. Kitts Music Festival and White Sands for 2025 showcases.
Guyana president promises to make sugar great again. St. Lucia tourism minister dismisses rumors of a U.S. travel ban on St. Lucia. Internationally, Iran rejects Trump's call for surrender, vows response if U.S. attacks.
Thank you for listening.